Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today I'm not going to introduce you to data cataloging. That's not the purpose of the presentation. But I will describe some tricky situations we have faced when receiving tenders through the eyes of a data catalog vendor, of course. And they might be inspiring because we see a lot of repeating patterns in failures, and I wanted to share that with you. I will not disclose the names of the companies, of course. It's quite confidential. But that might be funny. I hate seeing my face in a big screen. Anyhow, maybe you've read literature about the parallel we can make between political regimes and data cultures, because these are patterns that constantly repeat themselves. Let's start with data monarchies. Those regimes or those data cultures are triggered by companies that work in a highly regulated environment. So healthcare companies, some banks as well with BCBS 239. And in those data cultures, only a few set of people are allowed to access to corporate data. And the access is highly regulated. And of course, it prevents the companies from innovation. And the data cataloging and the data-driven strategy is triggered by fear, basically, because they have to stick to BCBS 239, solvency in the insurance market, a lot about healthcare regulation. So this is typically a regime we have seen a couple of years ago, and it tends to disappear. The second one is data aristocracy. That's something that we all know. If you look 20 years back with business intelligence, that was the case. In fact, only a few number of employees, experts, were allowed to access to corporate data. For business intelligence, now you call them analytics, but they were the only ones. And we also see now this happening with another set of experts, which are data scientists. But again, data access is regulated. It's a little bit more flexible than monarchies, of course, but again, it's very limited, and it prevents the companies from building innovation and creating value. Anarchies, that's something we see very often, surprisingly. It's a mess. I mean, anyone is allowed to do anything with data, and they breach GDPR compliance. They put their company in danger. And surprisingly, those anarchies, you can find them in monarchies. So people who are supposed to create value around data cannot wait for ages, and their DPO, their CDO, is putting a highly regulated system around data, but they have to achieve their jobs. And what they do is they build shadow IT, and they launch cloud infrastructures outside of the company, and we face a situation like this. I will describe. So, and the democracy, we'll discuss that later. Okay. Can you raise your hand? Who consider to be in a data monarchy very quickly? Nobody? Good news. Aristocracy? Monarchy? Everybody? Oh. And anarchy? So a lot of people are not responding. Maybe it's a little bit tricky to answer this question. We ran a survey last month. 12,000 companies, 300 and something replied. And these are the results. So it's pretty much balanced. 1/4 of anarchies, 1/4 of democracies, 1/4 of monarchies. What is funny here is that when you talk to C-level people, they consider to live in a data democracy. When you talk to their direct reports, it's a completely different story. So it seems that they're very much more optimistic than their direct reports. So let's talk about a few examples. First of all, insurance companies, top-down approach. They run 80 workshops involving all stakeholders and CDO office, CIO office, DPO. And they started to build the ideal meta model that could fit for the entire organization. It was a nightmare. 80 workshops for only 200 data sets. And the craziest thing is that they ended up with more than 5,000 attributes. So how can you imagine your data office will document those 5,000 attributes first? Second, how can you expect your end users to find their way out in such a complex ontology? And that's very common. We see a lot of those projects still, where it's a top-down approach, and at the end, the guys here who are waiting to access to data, they just give up because they've been waiting for months or years. Bank, BCBS 239, so all the banks had to stick to that regulation after the financial crisis. And this big bank is a customer. One business line, corporate investment banking, they ended up with 70,000 field-to-field lineage graphs. So once they have finished this huge amount of work, everything was obsolete, of course, because you cannot automate those lineage graphs. So considering that in a data catalog is a library of procedures or a consolidation system of proofs is a big mistake. And they stopped, and they bought a compliance app and then launched a data catalog to enable anyone to discover, understand, and trust the data they have in the company. But that's very common, especially in highly regulated verticals. Aristocracy, and surprisingly with a big e-commerce player, North American, acquiring a lot of companies. And they did clever things. They had different IT systems across the world, and they decided to consolidate on a data lake all the useful data they could find, and then launch use cases. So they started with the most natural one, which is analytics, sales analytics. So they cleaned up their data lake, built sophisticated data pipelines, consolidated something that was really good, and they documented very well. And then they decided to switch to another use case. The other use case was warehouse management optimization, and then logistic optimization. And at the end of the day, what happened is that based on this big data lake, which was aimed to serve anyone in the company, they had siloed data in their operational data. They completely replicated the same story in their data catalog. So this guy here could not access to information about data sets here. And how can you ask your employees to, especially data scientists, where they work with complex patterns and they need to open their minds on different data sets? They could not access to reports. So they could not create value. And they stopped and started with documenting data domains and then opened it to the entire organization. And it worked much better than the first iteration of the data catalog they did. Insurance, surprisingly, we have seen that several times. So this one was a disaster. Because it's highly regulated, as mentioned before, the guys who were doing, it was an insurance which was launching new types of insurance products. Pay-per-use, when you rent your car to another individual, you need a special insurance. So they were launching new types of pay-per-use insurance. So they were really aiming to do innovation around contracts and risk management. But because it was a completely monarchy, the guys just launched an AWS instance outside of the infrastructure of the company and started uploading data they could find in the company. And what happened is that one day, the guy started working from home. And then one guy has downloaded millions of records of personal data, and the CIO got fired. And that's real situations. Because you're putting too much constraints on your data citizens, they create shadow IT. And do things on their own and put your company at risk. And that's crazy. I mean, that's ridiculous. Data democracy, this is the ideal word. Well, data democracy doesn't mean that anyone can do anything, of course. You need to regulate it. You need to give enough literacy for end users to make them understand that you're under some constraints, some GDPR regulations, some BCBS, whatever the constraints are, the regulations are. But you need to keep them informed that they have duties around data. But it's the most complex, and of course the best scenario is to have a data democracy. But there are rights and of course duties. As a data citizen, I'm supposed to get access to any type of data that is useful for my job. But of course, on the other hand, I need to be aware that some data are sensitive. And rather than accessing the data, I should ask sometimes for permission to get access to this data. As a data citizen, I'm a data consumer, but I'm a data producer as well. So any data citizen needs to contribute to the corporate knowledge around data. And you need to organize in our segment, the data catalog in a way that people can crowdsource, can document, can give feedback on the quality of data in order for the data governance team to really document it well. So it's a matter of duties and rights, and if you do that in an incremental way, you will end up with a good ideal world. This is what the tech giants are doing. You can take a look on the internet about Airbnb and Netflix and those companies. They have opened their data widely to the entire organization, but in a highly regulated way, but at least anyone can see everything. And that's the only way to innovate and create value for your company. 3 takeaways. The lessons we have learned from our prospects and customer failures, but also from the projects we were selected for, is don't try to start big the first day. Start with a small use case, the one that creates the most immediate value. Address a few data sources, a few empowered users, and document it well. Open the service, look at what happens, get feedback. Once you've done that, you can enhance or improve your data democracy by touching other data sources or other data citizens or other use cases. But never do that in a big bang way, just incrementally in an agile way. We have customers that have started with just analytics and now have a corporate data lake doing predictive maintenance, financial controlling, and customer knowledge. They did it incrementally, so they started small and then scaled. That's the first lesson we have learned. Second lesson from a data catalog vendor perspective, don't expect a data catalog to be a library of procedures, complex workflows to access data, or a consolidation system of proofs. It's meaningless. You will end up with very lengthy projects, very costly, and the guys there are waiting to get access to data they've never been aware of. And second, when you buy an apartment or a house, you say 3 words: situation, situation, situation. About data cataloging, automation, automation, and automation. You need to have a reality-proof and fresh data catalog that people can trust at any time, because the information, the properties, the model, the documentation is up to date. So you need to integrate, you need to provide a platform, whatever you call it, it's a catalog or something else, that reflects the reality at any time, that people can query like a corporate yellow page, and then cherry picking the data sets, eventually asking for permissions, and then work with their preferred tool, whether it's Tableau or Python or whatever, to access to this data. That's 7 minutes is what's left? Okay. I am done because I would like maybe to answer a question. I have a little gift for you at the end of the presentation. We have written this Constitution of Data Democracy for you. Well, the Article 10, you don't have to have ZEENEA data catalog to build a data democracy. It's a little bit of a joke, but yeah, these are the important articles, and our customers like it. They put it in their office. You can share that with your CDO or CPO or CIO, because they have a wrong vision on what's happening on the field. They lie to themselves most of the time. It's a big data-driven strategy, but at the end, it's a big elephant, and the guys there are starving to access data. That's really the truth. And we see tenders with the Christmas wish list of features that will be never used. I've seen a tender with 400 features needed for data cataloging. Come on, it's meaningless.